So let's talk about the first new thing. So we've completely altered the way that people enter opportunities. We've rebuilt the screens from the bottom up. This was initially prompted because of the length of the form and how sort of scary it looks. And sort of it was becoming quite chaotic, and the divisions and different sections weren't obvious. It wasn't very easy to hide things until they were needed. My monitor's just gone off. Hopefully you can still see me.
Yeah, I can still see you, Rolf.
Okay, I don't know what that was going on there. Power Tech in Wales. So it was aimed to make that screen a bit easier, a bit more user-friendly, easier to use, and also to help with the providers that a lot of our customers have, which aren't fully engaged with the system. So they have their own volunteer management process or their own spreadsheets and stuff, and they're not interested at this point in managing their volunteers on the system. So it makes that definition a bit easier to cope with as well, as opposed to the old system, which just had the external opportunities, which didn't offer quite what people wanted. So it's available from the same spot at the minute. There is a link at the top of this page to see the old version if anyone wants to look at the old version and compare it, or isn't comfortable with the new one and wants to use the old one, which we'll leave in at least for the short term. Most of the options are pretty much the same, knocking around this site, but they've all been laid out in a better way and an easier way. I'm just going to put some details in here. For those that don't use the dual language system, this is where you see that you can put in an alternative language, in this case Welsh, to be viewed. So the first thing to notice is that it's now contained within separate panels. So it's quite obvious what each section is for. So this is where people tell you about the opportunity. And then you skip to the next panel. So everything's much more self-contained. It doesn't overwhelm people in one go. We're also looking to implement a save feature, so it will save as you're going along. That didn't work the first time I tried it, did it? So I need to get back to that and try and solve some of those issues, but we're hoping that will be ready in time. So you can save as you go along. You can skip between these panels as you go, so you can go back and change settings and update things if you're not sure. We've improved the picture upload to the opportunities as well. So if we pick a new, I find something that's quite fat. So you've got some editing controls now when you upload the image. So all the people are finding that they didn't want it in the middle, which was the default. So now it'll resize the width for you, but you can move it up and down in place, and it'll record those changes, as well as of course choosing one of the existing images. For the opportunity location, what we've decided with is, at least when they first enter the opportunity, is to use Google Places. So it will default to the address of the provider that's chosen here. Or if it's a provider who's adding the opportunity, it'll default to their home address, their organization address. So Google Places, you may have seen it on the search bar previously. So here you can just enter details. So if your opportunity wasn't in a very specific location, you might say it was in, I don't know, Trafalgar Square, for instance. And you click on the most likely, the most suitable location, and it brings up the map for you. You can put in postcodes. So this is our work postcode somewhere. You can put in street addresses. This is my old street address. Or as I said, you can just put in entire city and it'll pick the center point. If you choose a location that's not specific, it will automatically notice that, because it'll say, well, I don't have a postcode, or I don't have a specific sort of area for that. And it'll change to the area sort of opportunity, which you'll have noticed is the same as before. So if you choose a non-specific location, it gives you a little warning at the bottom that says you've selected a large area of the opportunity location, which is indicated on the map. So it's a way of entering all the types of locations in one spot, basically. So hopefully that will simplify it. When it comes to editing the opportunity, you still have the same controls as before. So you can still edit the opportunity afterwards if it's not quite what you wanted. Alternatively, you've got the home op.
Sorry, Rolf, I might go back one step. Am I right in saying, so that am I right in saying, just want to clarify because people make this mistake, that the circle doesn't signify anything other than the fact it's across an area, that's what that's signifying. I know people often think that it's only the opportunity exists within that circle area. It's just a different type of icon, essentially, just to make it
it's just a visual clue that it's over a large area.
Yeah.
Just so people don't think that it's we're trying to convey to people that it's not actually at this point indicated by the location, which is just the center point. It's available in a wider area. There is a text that comes along with that when volunteers look at the opportunity, which tries to explain that to people. Or of course, you've got it's a home opportunity, which you can do anyway. So up to this point, everybody enters in all these details, but the next screen is where those providers, which may manage their own volunteers, can make the choice to jump out at this point. So you've got the option of creating a fully managed opportunity where you go on to add all the other issues, all the other restrictions and properties of the opportunity, or you can create a self-managed opportunity. If I click that, there's a few more options which you'll recognize from the external opportunity type. So there's an organization name, so it's different from the provider name, when they want us to advertise this opportunity till, and the website for more details that the volunteer could go to when they're looking at the opportunity. What we've also added in this version is a log recording mechanism. So when volunteers view this opportunity, it's logged already, but also when any volunteers click the more details link and go out externally to that provider, we also make a recording of that so we can follow how sort of successful that opportunity is in garnering responses. If the person's logged in at the time, it will also record the volunteer that jumped out to that opportunity. And at this point, once they fill these things and they create the opportunity and that's it, the opportunity is created, they don't need to fill in any other stuff, they don't need to look at it. If people go for the fully managed opportunity option, then the rest of the options that everyone will be familiar with appear, but nicely packaged up into different sections, hiding away features that they don't need. So at this point, they're asked if they want to allow everybody access to this opportunity, or they want to restrict it by certain things. If they click no, they never see those options. If they click yes, then those options appear. Sorry, it's the other way around. So it's just a way of keeping the screen clean and keeping stuff that people don't need to see away from them, but accessible if they do need it. And all the way to the last set of screens.
We've got a question from Emily.
Yeah.
Does this replace the sessions option?
Does this replace what, sorry?
The sessions option, which I think is what you're about to come to now.
No, most of the things about the opportunity are the same. It's just the method of entering that information has changed a little bit. So here, the last screen, you're asked to pick whether it's sessions or flexible. And those sections are pretty much the same. There's been a little jigging about just to make them fit sometimes, but all the options that are already available are still available. They're just packaged up a little bit to hopefully make it a bit less scary for people the first time they see the form. So if I go back to the start, quite a few screens, which is why that form is so long.
Whilst you're going back to the start, Rolf, Tony asks, is there the option for volunteers from home or online, which I think you very briefly covered?
Yes, so that's when you choose a location. So this is the old form. As you can see, there's a lot on it. And it sometimes put people off. And there wasn't a way of easily saving this mid-edit, which is hopefully what we're going to achieve with the other form. Yeah, as I say, any options that are available in the old system are available here too. So when you're picking the location, it's just this is the option here. So if they click a home option, they don't need to see the map. It keeps it away from them. It keeps it nice and simple. So if they click at the home opportunity, they just go on to the next slide, and they don't ever see this section. Okay. Any other questions about that? So that's a quite big change, and will probably confuse a lot of people, which is why we've kept the old screen at the top. We'll probably be producing some materials, and there'll be extra help in the context to help people with that transition. And we will maintain that link at the start, so that people that don't like the look of this or get a bit put off by it can find the old version if that's what they're familiar with and comfortable with. And say we'll keep that up for probably quite a while until it becomes too difficult to keep them in sync. Any questions?
Any ideas? You know, when you're looking at the beta site. So after, obviously, as mentioned before, everyone's going to have access to the beta site after this conference. So you can actually play around with this and have a play around with this new opportunity creation form. But any feedback at all, please let us know. You know, so if you're, because it's quite, when you're kind of developing the software from this end, we use certain terminology which is often related to software, in all honesty, and we're not in the volunteer sphere the same. We're not the front line the same as you guys. So if you think anything you're not sure about, you think the wording could be tweaked, we have to keep in mind that it's used for obviously across lots of different types of organizations. But if you think potentially the wording could be adjusted and make it clearer, or maybe you didn't understand them, please let us know. It's via the support, isn't it, Rolf? Is that they're still flagging up the stuff via the support tickets?
If you go into support tickets, there's an option to change what the support ticket's for. Just give us an idea, so you can change it to just general support, just something you're looking for help for, a bug, and a new feature request.
Joanna's got a question for us, Rolf. It's a good question. Is there an option to have multiple locations? I.e., if a person is volunteering, is an in-person volunteering opportunity at several sites available?
There isn't. We have looked at it a couple of times. Indeed, in this release, I looked at putting some framework in to handle it. It gets quite difficult when you look at the search and editing and managing those opportunities. There is a pathway through it, but the best we could come up with at the time was that in the search, so people look for opportunities that were close to them. It would have to return multiple versions of the same opportunity in different places. So you get that sort of duplication.
Because it has to calculate. We have the key issue. It's calculating the distance from where the volunteer lives to the location of the opportunity. And obviously, if you have the same opportunity with multiple locations, and you can say, well, just choose the nearest one, but it's easy to say that than actually programming that. So that's the kind of fundamental, as far as I'm aware of. That's
yeah, but it's definitely something we're looking at, and we know that it would be useful for people, so you didn't end up having to duplicate opportunities or use a wide area type one when it was really in two centers. But right now, the best thing to do is just to duplicate that opportunity in different locations.
We've got a couple more questions coming in, Rolf, if that's okay. It may be useful to move the do you provide expenses and restrictions to self-manage option. Just a thought, maybe others don't agree.
We're actually looking at, right now the expenses module is split down the middle, as it were. So you can say the opportunity to pay expenses, but it's not a managed expense. So just get to that screen, God knows where it is. Application restrictions, expenses. So when you say yes to expenses, you're then given a further choice about whether it's managed or not. Obviously, for people who were running their own management, they wouldn't ever click that option. So it would have to just be their expenses payable, yes, and it would be these options wouldn't appear, the managed expense options, excuse me. But that's perfectly possible. What goes in those external opportunities was really not very well defined. Everyone has a slightly different idea, but what we didn't want to do is end up with that just being just as busy and just as complicated with just as many features as and options as the fully managed one. But yeah, that's certainly, if you want to put that in a feature request, things you think, anyone who thinks there are options that should be in the external type self-managed opportunity, then yeah, please let us know. Most of the things will work to some extent. Most of the restriction type stuff wouldn't work because you can't really restrict a person just from following a link, and they probably wouldn't want that anyway. But yeah, things like expenses or travel information or other things that are just useful bits of information, they could certainly go in.
And one more question from Claire. On the screen, how do you want to manage your volunteers? Could there be some text to explain the benefits of us managing the opportunity? So the first question, so to speak. There's been a lot of talk about the text for this page. It's a particularly challenging one that to meet the range of clients that we serve. So we are sort of aware of the challenge that this page faces sort of users.
So you've got a bit of a positive sentence there about it, but it's not very specific. It is difficult. We have discussions, fights basically, about this sort of thing all the time, because if you have too much text on the screen, you're making someone pass it every time they use the screen, and they only really need that information once. If you hide it behind a tooltip, nobody reads it. So there has to be some way where you want to introduce those themes and those topics to people the first time, perhaps the second time, the third time, but then you want to start stripping away that extra information, which makes it a lot more complicated than just slinging text on the screen. If we put a paragraph of text here, people will try to pass that every time they get to the screen, especially if they're using it intermittently. They're not using it every single day. They'll get to the screen and they'll spend time reading a paragraph of text they don't need to read anymore. So it's that balance between usability and making the user interface good for people that use it a lot and the people that have used it for the very first time. And they both have quite different requirements, unfortunately. But yeah, if you've got any ideas about this text, let us know, because we've wrangled with it quite a lot about what it means to even the text here, create a fully managed opportunity. No one's entirely happy with this either. So if you've got any great ideas, definitely.
And that kind of answers Anne's next question. When you say manage, does this mean the details are put in the system?
They work, yeah. So when you create a self-managed opportunity, it replicates what happens now when you create an external opportunity. So it's still there for you to view as an admin. You can still change it back to an internal opportunity if you want. You can add extra things and change all the pictures. So you can still, as an admin, you can still manage it. But the expectation is that the provider isn't going to manage it on the system. They're just going to wait for the people to land on their site or their website or get in touch with them directly, and they're not going to manage it. But as an admin, yeah, you see it, it shows up in the report, everything works the same way. It's just marked as being an external opportunity.
And that kind of answers Mystica's question, which is, once an offer has been created, say you made a mistake and want to switch to a different session type, e.g. fixed to flexible, is it possible to do? If not, is there something the request to put forward to develop?
Yeah, it is possible in certain situations. So if you create a self-managed opportunity at a later date, you can turn it back. An admin can turn it back, or the provider can turn it back into a fully managed opportunity. If you create a flexible opportunity, you can turn that into a sessional-based opportunity at any time, because there's only one session. If you have a opportunity which has sessions, that you can turn that into a flexible opportunity as well, but only if there's no opportunities on it, only if there's no volunteers on it. If you have a sessional opportunity where you've already got a bunch of volunteers on them, it's hard to know how to manage those volunteers, because they're on sessions that are on set dates, and you change it to a flexible. So there's certain restrictions on when you can change things. But certainly at the point of creation, before anyone's joined it and before it's been released, you can pretty much swap anything into anything else.
Yeah, because I've seen it's usually at the point of creation. I've seen people make that mistake, and then they realize after they've created it, they say, "Oh, actually, I wanted I want it to be sessions rather than flexible. I want like a rota system." And so it's usually quite early on, so it's not a problem. Obviously, as Rolf just pointed out there, if you go from a flexible one and it's got 20 volunteers on it, then you move them onto a session-based one with 10 sessions. Which sessions do you put them on? So we can't let that happen, because obviously it's impossible to know where they should be.
But there is workarounds for that we can suggest to people, and if that's something that people are interested in, Steve, we could put that down as a note for a future masterclass. I'm keen that we're already half an hour in, and we've only covered one of the new features, and there's loads more to talk about. So I'm going to close questions on this particular feature, Rolf, and ask you to move on to the next one.
Okay, so the next one is bulk emails. It's much quicker to go through most of the rest of them. So now you can schedule your bulk emails, which a lot of people have been wanting to do for a while. So when you create a bulk email, nothing much has changed. You've still got all the same details here for including opportunities, including the volunteer stats, but now you've got an extra row of options here. which is all about scheduling. So you ask whether you want to schedule it or not. You've got a date and a time. Couldn't be simpler. They appear in a different menu on the side here. So you'll have the scheduled emails here. And again, you can delete and edit just the same way as drafts before they get sent. You can send them ad hoc, which also cancels the schedule. So it will still only get sent once. And obviously, once they get sent, they'll move from scheduled into the sent side. So that's pretty simple. I don't think anyone will probably have any questions about that. I don't think so. But it's super useful and quite powerful if you've got if you're running an event or something that's time-based and you want to release emails at certain points. It's great for setting up that email stream. There's no limit to how many you can add to the schedule yet. If people go crazy and use it, and we end up with 4,000 emails that are scheduled, and I have to look at that, but I doubt that will happen. So you can schedule as many as you want. I don't know if people are aware of the changes to the bulk email that have happened in the last couple of versions.
Probably worth a quick refresh, Rolf.
But you can now, for a start, it uses the same format as the. Let's see if I can get this sent to me and show you a copy of it. So it uses the same version, the same style as the weekly summary email. So you can include the volunteer stats and events and things like that into an email. Let me just see if I can get this previewed. So people can see what it looks like. Just have to change the screen sharing. Hold on a second, sorry. Too many windows. So it's not a very good example, but it uses this sort of format now with the bulk emails rather than just the plain white. So it'll pick up the color scheme from your profile, whatever you set for your main menu color, have your logo on it. You can see here the strips for the stats for the volunteer it's going to, the actual title, the content, and it will include details of the opportunities that you've checked on these boxes here, including the link. So it's a much better looking email. And there's a lot more options to make it more interesting for people. The rest is the same, pretty much.
Okay, there's no one's popped any questions in the comments. So if anyone does have any questions, we can always come back to them. So if something crosses your mind a little bit later, you think, oh, what about this, what about that? Then please do pop it in the comments. Rolf, do you want to jump on to the next?
Yeah, so to go along with that, we've got the volunteer inbox. So volunteers have been able to see messages they've been sent before, but now what they've got, I'll find someone's on a lot of ops. They've got their own inbox, which is shown on their dashboard. And this also allows them to reply directly to messages and to opportunities they're on. So it looks a little bit like an email client. It's not meant to be an email client or replace an email client. It's just meant to bring together all their messages. So just as you can see the messages in their profile, they can see these messages now, where they come from, what's in the message. They can reply directly to these messages, and they can create a new message on this side. But additionally, they can also select providers. So in this drop-down, they'll always have the organization name, which in this case is Beta Site, but they'll also show the providers of opportunities they're currently interacting with. So they can email directly to the provider and also reply to any messages that the provider sends them. So this one, for instance, comes directly from the provider. And they can hit reply, and that will go straight to the provider, not to the admin email. Similarly, if they go to the Get in Touch page, if they're already logged in, it'll cycle them back to that inbox page. So it forces them to use this to create messages. Again, hopefully, channeling those messages to the people that need them rather than them all going through the admin site and you having to field them and pass them on to the providers and those sorts of things. So that's primarily why this was developed, is to stop those emails going to the admin that was really meant for the provider, and also to give the volunteer a nice view of the messages they've received. And we're hoping to get the text messages into here at some point as well.
Anne has asked the question, has anything changed for attaching, I'm assuming attaching a document for to an email, Anne, is that correct?
Yeah, for the bulk email, it's the same. It uses the same list of files wherever you create the email. So you've got the attachments here. You can upload a new attachment in place here. But in the message and email folder, you've got an email attachment link. And this shows the attachments that are available. So if when you send an email to someone else, say an individual email to a volunteer, you get the same set of files here, test attachment, which is the one.
I think that answers Anne's question. Does that answer your question, Anne? Oh, you're on mute, Anne. We can't hear you. Might be easier in the chat until we work out why. There we go. Oh, you're back on mute again.
So the way the attachments work is to save space and time, especially when you're sending emails to lots of people, is the attachments are inserted into the email as links where they can find the file. So they're not mine encoded, it's called, they're inserted into the email, because if you put in, say, a 20 megabyte PDF and send it to 400 people, that creates a lot of time constraints and a lot of space constraints for us. So they're still included in the same way in most situations.
I think Anne's just typed in there, so we'll come back to it in a second, Anne, with you, if that's okay.
Okay, the next thing are the on-screen hints and tips, which you may have already noticed at the top of the page here. So these are general and specific to certain pages. So whenever you open a new page, you'll get some tip at the top, which will either be, as I say, a general one that can appear on any page, or a page-specific one. We're trying to answer these all the time, and every time someone asks a question on Crisp or on the chat or the sport, if it's suitable, we try and put it in the hints and tips. There's about 200 of them at the minute, but obviously we'll keep adding them as we go along, and hopefully we'll end up in the thousands. You'll see this bar on every page unless you use one of these options. So you can close it, so you're just not looking at it at the minute, but if you refresh the page, the hints and tips will reappear. It'll be a different one. You can hide for 30 days if you're just fed up of reading them and they get in your way, and a month or so later they'll reappear, or you can hide forever, which sounds drastic, but I should show you where you can go to switch that back on afterwards. But I guess I'll show you now because it fits. But or you can hide forever, in which case if I refresh this page, no hints and tips, as they get annoying. If you notice here on the top right, we've added a new icon, which is a little profile icon. If you click it, it tells you who you're logged in as at the top. So I'm logged in as Sid. It's a long story. So this gives you two further options to log out, which you've already got, and also my profile, which is the new bit, which fits in with the tips, because you've got a section here called settings, and here you can change the option to show hints and tips. So if you do switch them off forever and you want to get them back, this is how you get them back, via the profile, my profile, settings. And you've got some other things here as well, which are specific to the person logged in, which affect the way the interface works. So you've got the default search ordering for when you're looking at volunteers, the default search ordering when you're looking at providers, and the default search ordering when you're looking at opportunities. So if you set these to be registration date, for instance, every time you go to the volunteer search page, that will be the default ordering. So whatever search you do, it'll be ordered by registration date. Profile has your basic account information, your name, your email address, your password to reset, which was available before but not here. So I just mentioned that because that's how you get the tips back on. And as we get more personalized settings, this is where they'll appear. So if you've got any ideas for things you'd like to personalize, like things that are on your home page, on the dashboard here, let us know, because we've now got a place to put them and to edit them.
A quick question, Rolf, from Katie. can users send a back to messaging? Can users send a message to multiple people, i.e., provider and admin?
No, not presently. It's a good idea.
It is a good idea.
Make a note of that.
We're going to borrow that one, Katie. Thank you.
No, presently it's just limited to individuals, just to keep the interface simple.
Sorry, Anne was asking before. I just responded on the chat in case I missed it. Yeah, she was asking about the attachment, adding attachment to emails. So you can add a new attachment to emails as the normal way you'd expect. When you create an email and you add the attachment and you choose it from your, from wherever it is on your computer in the normal way. What Rolf was going through at the end, which a lot of people, to be fair, I know a lot of people may never use, but it's something which some of you will use, where you have frequently used attachments. Like say you have like an induction booklet or something like that, and that's something you send to every new volunteer, but you have to do it frequently. Rather than having to choose it, find it on your My Documents and the rest of it, you can just see it there and go, oh yes, that's a file, and it's kind of saved and ready to go, basically.
You can't attach files to, if you want to attach an actual file to the bulk upload. Not with images, you can upload the images and embed them in email. But the only way to attach a file is to use this system. So you have to upload it to the system first. And that's because, as I explained previously, in the email, it actually puts a link to that file rather than embed the file. So we're not sending the actual file to lots of people.
But basically for what you're saying, Anne, if you click on that blue button there, which Rolf was just on before, okay, it's going to come up and then you choose the file, then it's going to upload it, attach it to an email in the same way that you do normally when you send in attachments. So hopefully that answers your question.
But yeah, you need to upload it first.
Yeah.
Okay.
When they click on it, Rolf, it automatically selects it there, doesn't it? If I remember correctly, when you you click on upload new attachment, it doesn't just add it and then you have to select it again. Once you choose a file there, that's it.
No, you have to select it.
So you need to change that. Get it to auto select.
Okay. So hints and tips, pretty easy. The next one are the sharing controls, which won't apply to some of you. We offer a few different ways to share opportunities. So some of you may be in what we call a link-wide group, which is other people using TeamKinetic, either that are linked in a geographical sense or in a semantic sense. And you can arrange it so that their opportunities appear on your search pages and vice versa, and you have some control over whether you only accept opportunities or you only send out opportunities, those sorts of things. If you don't use link-wide and you're interested in looking at what's available, then get in touch with us, because there's probably is other people using TeamKinetic that you can collaborate with. For people that are using it already, we've got some new options in the sharing section of an opportunity. So any opportunity that you manage, in the left-hand side, you've got a sharing option. And this is where you can access the shares for that system, whether they're link-wide or in this case with Milo, which is a Volunteer Scotland sharing system. And it enables you to share and unshare after the opportunity has been created, and also update any share-specific details. So for Volunteers Scotland, they've got these extra things that they have to fill in for the opportunity. Prior to that, it was quite difficult to change the sharing options once the opportunities had been created. So if you are sharing, it gives you a bit more flexibility afterwards. If you're not sharing, then get in touch about it, because there might be something we can do. Probably won't be any questions about that. Just a little quick one here is the what's happening today section. So on the home page for admins, in the summary section, we've got things happening today, which will list things like interviews, meetings, sessions, training courses, anything that's going on today, with some sort of link to actually either manage them or update them and those sorts of things. Great for people that are pretty busy and lots of things going on, because it lets you know what opportunities are happening and when and all these sorts of things. That's a quick one. Rattling through now.
Sorry, quick question, Rolf, before you jump on. When sharing to Volunteer Scotland, any edits to original op don't seem to come through.
Yeah, it's not a fully synced system at the minute. We only sync up closes and opens. So once it's created, if you close the opportunity, it'll also be closed on Volunteer Scotland. It is possible to do a fully synced one, but there hasn't been the budget for it. In that sense, it's not something that we're really. It's a difficult situation. We're not 100% responsible for the sharing into Volunteer Scotland with Milo. It's a collaborative process. So we need everyone working together, I suppose, to make that happen. And so far, we've not been able to get a fully synced service. So yeah, you're correct. If you change the title or a description or any of the attributes that are taken over to Milo, they don't get updated. It's the same the other way around.
Oh, we got a pause.
I think Rolf.
Pause. And nod your head, making sure it's like I see you moving. And could hear us. Rolf's. Do you want to? I can't skip forward. And probably take over. I bet he's gonna leave and rejoin. I'm guessing. Just bear with us one moment. Let's get him to,
So whilst we're waking Rolf up and putting 10 pence in the meter, has anybody got any other questions or anything they would like to quickly discuss?
There is something I'm not sure whether he covered it. Did Rolf show? And people, when you training, people don't tend to be aware of it. That you can see what organisations near you use TeamKinetic. So essentially, when we link these systems together in the link-wide network, he used a few different phrases there, which some of you may not be aware of. One of them being the link-wide network. So that's essentially when we get multiple TeamKinetic systems and we link them together. So, for example, in Manchester, we've got both universities, Manchester Metropolitan University, University of Manchester, and the council, Manchester City Council, and they're all linked together in a network. Or in Wales, we've got 30 systems, all the volunteer centres across the whole of Wales, a company linked together in a network, which means that when they create an opportunity, it can be shared, it's visible across all systems. So any volunteer off any system would potentially be able to see it. If you want to see what systems, and sometimes people think, well, I don't know who's near me, but if you go to, there is an option in there, which I could show you if you want me to.
Sorry about that, my power went off.
Oh, it's back on. There is an option in there if you go to opportunities and providers down to sharing, I think it is, which lists all those different organisations near you. Sorry,
Rolf, we had a question from where was it? From Emily. It's again another one we've discussed at length in the office. Is there any chance of removing features from the provider view?
Yes, there's a chance. So we have currently the only mechanism for doing it is using a trusted provider mechanism. So you basically only allow certain things to appear to trusted providers and limit the things that are available to the regular providers. That's not ideal. What we're looking to do in the future is to create, it's actually in one of the slides later on, is to create a customizable sort of profile, like an authorization profile for the provider. So there'll be options you'll be able to click on and off on a per provider basis to say whether they can see this or see that, or perform this function or perform the other function. So we probably won't do anything else now until we get that ready, in terms of trying to help providers, help with this issue of hiding certain things with certain providers, because it'll be we're already down the road of doing it in profiles. But if you take a look at the trusted providers, that might do what you need it to do. So maybe take a look at that.
And Anne had a question about sharing, and we'll try and get this high level on because it can get complicated pretty quickly. How does it, when you share an opportunity, how does that work for GDPR? Is there an agreement? Who owns the volunteer data?
Okay, so when volunteers register for an application which is using sharing, they get another consent box at the bottom, which means they consent to their details being shared to providers and external organizations who they've agreed to join an opportunity with. And that consent is given when they register, and there's also a box at the bottom which gives us more information about what is shared and why it's shared. So that handles the consent aspect of that side. In terms of the GDPR, there isn't an in-basis agreement between the two organizations, but there are some clauses in our agreement with you as a customer about sharing. the volunteer data remains owned by the home opportunity, and the external organization only gets to see a minimal version of that data, and they can't edit it or update it or change it. So the volunteer still belongs to the originating organization, but some of the information is shared to the external organization.
Sharing,
as you'd expect, I should say. So as you'd expect, obviously the provider, some volunteers turn up and they may have registered on a different system, but if they're turning up, the provider still needs to know some basic information about who they are and how to contact them and this, that, and the other. But it is.
I don't know if there's any. Let me see if there's any external volunteers on their system.
Sorry, and I misunderstood what your question was. Yeah, Rolf. I think Rolf explained that a bit better.
So these little icons indicate that these are external volunteers. So when you open that volunteer information screen, you get this warning at the top saying that it's an external volunteer, you have limited editing permissions, and you only see certain things. For instance, you only see their age, you don't see their birth date, things like that. So if I go back to someone who's internal and manage them, you see no message, and you get the birth date and some other bits and changes. You'll see impersonating and revoking access, all these extra things that you can do to a volunteer that belongs to you. So we do highlight that information when they register. If you enter into a sharing agreement afterwards, and you've already got thousands of volunteers that are registered, we do have a procedure where we can update that consent. So basically, a flag is set, and then when volunteers log in, the first time they log in after you've started to share with a different organization, they have to confirm that consent again. So the consent they've already given plus the extra consent for sharing with external opportunities.
I guess Rolf will talk at the end about some of the future plans, and there is some work we've already started around this idea of volunteer passporting. So there is some quite exciting stuff that we've got in mind around data sharing that uses some extra really clever technology, which we're not going to get too much into today because it is still very much in the prototype stage. But we see this opportunity to share as something really exciting and something really unique to TeamKinetic, and something that we're quite heavily invested in. So, but I'll let Rolf touch on that when he gets to the last slide. And
it's not actually on my last slide, but I will talk about it.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Rolf. Let you down that cul-de-sac.
So we've got some reporting improvements. They're not as big as we wanted, but there are some improvements in the reporting. We've gone through every single report that's available on the reporting page, the pie charts especially, and made sure they all align, so you see the same numbers all the time. So like registrations also includes external volunteers now. All these pie charts have been checked to make sure that when they're referring to active volunteers, active means the same in every single report, so you should get the same numbers. Steve put a lot of effort in checking all these and making sure they were right. We've added applicants as a chart, which isn't on here because they haven't got any applicants, I don't think. So we've added some applicant data for those who use apply opportunities, which tells you what sort of status various volunteers are in, how many applicants you've got, how many refused applicants you've got, those sorts of things. So they're all in much better shape now, and the way they're laid out is much better. Additionally, your providers have access now to the day schedule report. If people aren't using this, it's a great way to see what's going on in the near future. You can select start and end dates, filter it by opportunities and events, and it'll show you every single day in that period, whether there's sessions or not on that day. And if there are sessions, it tells you which opportunities they're in and how many slots are empty currently. It tells them differently when they're full. This isn't a very popular system, as all the slots are empty. And if you click on the link, you get to see the volunteers that are on the system. Obviously, there aren't any volunteers on any of these, but it'll tell you which volunteers are in each of those sessions. So it's pretty useful. So the providers can now see that. The providers can also see the map reports, which they couldn't before, which maps all your volunteers and your opportunities on a map. So you can obviously zoom in out and do all the Google Map goodness. zoom in when there's more than one volunteer. This is obviously a very busy house.
Is it just their volunteers I've seen from the provider?
Yeah, so all provider reports are limited to the provider data.
Fiona's got a question for us here, which is, can the admins see the day schedule, and is it printable for each week?
The admins can see it. It started off as an admin-only report. To be perfectly honest, I've never tried printing it. So it'll probably need some adjustment for printing. If you want to give it a go and let me know how it looks. It's not very conducive to printing if you've got a lot of sessions, I imagine. So if you give it a go in your instance, and we can maybe get together and chat about any improvements we can make to it.
We know that we get feedback often from organisations that have got shops and cafes and regular sessions where they like to have something they can send out to volunteers. It's quite tangible, but it's a very, very difficult problem to solve, to get something that looks good. So if anybody has that problem and would like to sort of have a chat with Rolf and Steve about how we might come up with something that could help solve that, we're quite open to that conversation.
I mean, the printed view wouldn't include actual volunteers on it either. So it might work out better with a download from here instead.
Yeah, and Tony's come with us somewhere. This is the kind of thing you run into very, very quickly. Is there an option to change the view settings for accessibility, e.g. people with visual impairments or dyslexia? So, I mean, if we're talking about the printed view for this particular report, then that's slightly separate. But for the site as a whole, we've actually had conversations with, what's the name of the organisation, the accessibility. There's a third-party organisation that provides software that can be purchased to sit on top of TeamKinetic that provides those services. It is a little bit expensive. It
can read text out and
yeah,
adapt the color schemes and things.
I can't remember what it's called, Rolf. What was the organisation? Was it Read
out, something like that?
Recitify.
We do follow the accessibility guidelines as much as we can in terms of color contrast and things like that. We don't have any sort of dark mode or high contrast CSS you can switch in, but it will listen to changes to things like text size. There's no restriction on zooming, those sorts of things. So a lot of inbuilt accessibility tools that people use should work fine, like text browsing, for instance. If I use the tab key when the pages load, completely. So I don't know if you saw it then. So when you use the tab key to navigate, you have things like a skip to content link that you can follow, which is invisible to people that don't use the keyboard. The menu options are selectable, and you can also tab into the actual menu by pressing return, and then you can go through these options. So there's a fair bit of accessibility support built in, but it's an ongoing thing. You can never get it perfectly. You have to constantly strive to make it better, basically. So if anyone's got any insight into those needs, then please let us know.
I will try and find the name of the organisation we did speak to. Recite me. That's it. Thank you.
That's Alex.
Thank you, Steve.
Alex will just pick that one. Thank you.
There you go. The Recite Me is if you want to put the link into it, Alex, that'll be into the chat. We've had preliminary conversations with us being able to support their product. What you would do with that product is you would purchase a license from them you can purchase it for our site and any other site, to be honest. And then they provide a series of tools to do with contrast and size and screen reading and language and a whole range of stuff that really will enhance your accessibility. But it's an add-on over and above the TeamKinetic license. But we will continue to strive to do the best we can to make it as accessible as we can, sort of in product.
In terms, Tony's just added about font changes. There is, for people in the know, there's a CSS section in the options look and feel CSS, where you can target pretty much all the available sort of areas and things like text and fonts and stuff. You can put your own font in. You could change the size. So if I put in here, for instance, change the font size of all P elements. There's something ridiculous. It's very large. And saved it. I would change the P elements across the entire volunteer site. So there are options to change directly in that sense, but you do need some CSS knowledge, or you need to find some with CSS knowledge. But once you get into it, it is quite simple. It is quite powerful. What's the name of the site where they changed it all, Steve? Chris?
General Practice Alliance. So it's passport.volunteer. Volunteer passport, sorry. Which for anybody that's around tomorrow for the session, these guys are running a session on how they redesign their site using CSS. So it'll be a really interesting session. So if people are interested in customizing their site to as far as it can be customized, you can see some of the things that are possible here just using that CSS function. This
started as just the bog standard TeamKinetic page with the slider and the options, and everything you see is changed. They've done through the CSS available there. So it is quite powerful, but it is specialist knowledge in order to achieve this sort of effect. But you can always have a fiddle about with it, and anything that isn't working, you just delete. As soon as you wipe this out and say that it's all gone, so you don't have to worry about that. But you can see it's because of the way the site is designed, everything has its own target. So you can target the menus, you can target the entries in the menus, you can target search bars, and pretty much everything has an idea or a class that you can target.
Okay. We're getting close in time, Rolf. So
right, going in. Inter-admin chat is there's only a couple more things. Inter-admin chat is something we sort of thought about as a last-minute thing. So we wanted to get people's ideas, views about it. If I can just. So the idea is that we always trying to foster communication between our customers, because there's a lot of best practice and good knowledge and extremely wide experience in that group. And we want to try to make it easy for people to share that experience and share that wisdom. So one of the things we thought about was maybe an inter-customer chat. So it works in the same way as the opportunity chat. Right now, it's got the same layout. So the idea is that there'll be different rooms that you can join and subscribe to, and you'll be told when there's new messages, and you can add new messages and reply to messages. But these will be directed at all the other users of TeamKinetic, all the other admin users, and you'll be able to read and respond and reply there. I've only just sort of started fleshing it out, so we just wanted to know if people were interested in it. So, and if so, I'll get it finished. So we'll just have a quick poll now. Should we add admin chat? Yes, it's very simple. Okay, so that poll should be live.
If you click on the little poll when it pops up,
nope,
then
people found it already. It remains to be sorted out what we do about the messaging and communications and stuff. So if you subscribe, if you get an email as soon as a message is created, or we notify you on the screen perhaps, or maybe it's a digest like every day about new emails, all that sort of stuff's up in the air. And so we'll be interested to hear what you've got to say about that, because I know people get a lot of emails and a lot of notifications, and they may not want to be known straight away, or perhaps we have that as an option, when to be notified, daily digest or immediately, those sorts of things.
Rosie just asked, sort of going back to the previous point, Rolf, about accessibility. When you get a moment, can you list a couple of the examples of the built-in accessibility tools?
There is a blog post about it, so I'll fish that out and make sure it's up to date.
Alex is currently rapidly searching our blogs to find that for you, Rosie.
It's fairly older, that blog post. There might have been some things that have been put in since then. It's mostly around making sure things are labeled properly. So where you see a bunch of links, so like if you go to, this is also focused on the volunteer-facing side. It's not as extensive in the provider and admin side. So where you might see, homepage is probably a good example. So where you might see a row of buttons like this, to you, it's obvious what the context is. This manage and this grant access button belongs to test summary because it's visually associated with it. If you can't see and are using a keyboard, I don't know if anyone's ever watched a video of someone using a keyboard reader, but a screen reader, but I would suggest you go and find one. They're insanely fast.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible.
The speed they listen to the words is insane. But they will just get a list of manage grant access, manage grant access, manage grant access in some terrible monotonous computer tone. And it won't be immediately obvious to them what the context is for that button. So most of the buttons and links that are repeated, like in the footer, for instance, on the volunteer side, have hidden text, which you can't see, but screen reader can, which would say things like manage test summary, manage test summary report. So the context is included in the text for the button. Making sure pictures are described, the keyboard shortcuts that I showed you about skipping the navigation so you don't have to tab through the navigation the whole time, forms being keyboard accessible and being focusable. When modals appear, for instance, there's something called an ARIA alert, which tells a screen reader, oh, this screen's appeared. Because again, there's a visual context for you. It's appeared on the screen in the middle. Whereas for a screen reader, that doesn't happen. There's no indication that the screen has appeared. It's just more text on the page. So they're alerted that that's happened and shown where to get to it. Things like the search appear, for instance, when you start editing. This is find something that's actually in it. But when that screen appears, the focus has to be given to that screen so that the screen reader can tab from the input to the response, because this response has just appeared on top of the screen. It's not actually there normally, it's just stuck on top. So we do some magic in the background so the screen reader can now tab straight from there to here. And when they close the window, if this, you can see the little focus element around it. When it closes again, the focus goes back into the screen. So there's a lot of small things which we hope make it easier, as well as the more obvious big things like just making sure images are described and color contrast is right and the font isn't too small, which are the easy, obvious ones. It's how people use the system. That's what's difficult to get right. And unfortunately, some aspects of the system will still be just inaccessible to people with certain requirements. It's a very hard, ongoing issue. Is there a way to create volunteer chat rooms? No, there isn't. We've spoken at length as well about volunteers talking to each other independently of being an opportunity, and that whole social aspect of the application. We've never got anywhere with it. We don't know how popular it might be with volunteers, and it comes with a lot of issues in terms of privacy, control, safety, safeguarding. So we pretty much stayed away from it because for us right now, speaking to other customers, the balance between the risks and the gains is just not working out for us at the minute. If that's what you mean about volunteers chatting to each other.
The workaround, Jade, is you can easily create an opportunity that is flexible and has nothing really associated with it, and put the volunteers onto it, and that would in itself create the chat group that you wanted to create. It's a bit of a workaround that solves the problem, but it's not quite the clean sort of unique volunteer chat room that you're looking for. But as Rolf says, it's something we'll continue to look at, and we'll continue to speak to clients that think it may offer some real value. We're just a little bit nervous of some of the potential, operating costs of something like that are quite difficult to mitigate.
I think it's one thing, isn't having an opportunity where people on that opportunity can chat and everyone can see it, the provider can see it, and all the other people on that opportunity can see it, and the admin obviously you can see and do everything. That's one thing which is safe. Never seen any issues with it, and then there's another thing when they're chatting directly to each other without any kind of oversight whatsoever from providers or admins would have oversight, but even from providers. So it's just something that we're wary of. Not saying no, but we're certainly wary of at this stage.
Again, I'm pushing for time because I know we're nearly there. We've not even looked at the app as yet. So
quickly run through this stuff. So there's a few things that we're still working on for this release that I'm keen to get out for this release. So we've got the onboarding help and info screen for volunteers, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on today. So these are going to be screens that the volunteer ends up at after they first register. So as well as the email and other things I'll talk about later, it's a way of helping your volunteers work out what to do next, because currently they just sort of get dumped to the dashboard or the search page, and they can search for opportunities and have a look around. But it can be overwhelming for that first volunteer, that first time they register. So we're trying to solve that issue. The admin chat we've just been speaking about, most people seem to be okay with it. There's a few votes for not adding it. I guess it can be optional, obviously. We can switch it on and off for people if you don't want to use it. So I don't see any issues with keeping it away from people that don't want to use it. We've got some more trusted provider options that me and Steve have been talking about to add in, and the self-certified hours for volunteers. So the way that is envisaged to work is that the volunteer may be doing work off plan, or is volunteered before they got involved with this organization, or is currently volunteering with something that isn't in the application. So it's twofold. It's a way of admins finding out about other volunteering that's going on that they might need to get involved with or want to get involved with. And it's a way for volunteers to get some sort of, not kudos isn't the right word, but some sort of approval for the hours they've done. So they will be able to add hours and describe the opportunity and the situation they've gained those hours into the system. And the admin has the chance to certify those hours to say, yeah, I think they're right, they're correct, and they're worthwhile. And then they'll show up on that volunteer certificate and progress report and record of achievement if they move on somewhere else and need that recorded. I still see emails knocking back and forth quite often about people that have done volunteering and aren't seeing their hours and don't really understand it's because it's not recorded on the system. So they're things that for this release we hope, so they'll appear in the next 2 weeks in the beta one. Okay, so if the problem is with hours that they've already done within the organization, you still got the option to add hours individually to a provider, to a volunteer if they've done extra hours that weren't on the session. I think that's what you're saying. You've got problems tallying up vol added hours. I don't really understand that question. I don't understand what the issue is. But if you open a support ticket for that, I think it sounds a bit more complicated than we can answer here. And I'll get on it.
I think she's talking about provider hours, isn't she, and volunteer logged hours. She wants the volunteer logged hours to basically automatically be matched on the provider side. Yeah.
Okay. So if you open a support ticket, I can go through some of that stuff with you, and there is a way of matching up the hours. So you can just match all the volunteer added hours to the provider added hours, those sorts of things. But yeah, if you open a support ticket,
I'll be covering that during my session as well, actually.
Okay. We're still working on a mobile app. So some of you know our mobile development team was based in Ukraine, which isn't a tourist hotspot right now, and led to quite some problems. So a lot of them have to relocate and move away and have more serious things to think about than our app. So that put us back a long time, which is why this has been a long gestation for the next version of mobile apps. We are still working on them. They're not vaporware, they are there. And I'm hoping that we can get them out very close to this next release. So certainly this year, and hopefully October time, the same time as release the new version here. Things that have changed, which are will be quite useful. When people log in now, if they log in with, say they're using multiple versions of TeamKinetic in different situations, but with the same email address and password, which a lot of people do, when they log in, they'll be given an option to choose the organization they want to interact with at that moment, and they can just click on one or the other, and it'll sign them into that application. The opportunity support is much wider now, so it supports applying opportunities that are restricted, opportunities that require references. All these sorts of things are now included in the app. So all the ops that are currently available, all the op types that are currently available are now supported in the app. And additionally, what we're working on right now is a registration process and a white labeling process. So people will be able to create a version of the app that's specific for their organization, and their volunteers will be able to search under their name and their organization name to find that app on the App Store, and they'll be able to register in that app without going to the website at all. The reason people can't register right now is because the app serves all our customers across all the different applications, so we don't know who they are when they register for what organization they want to use. So hoping that white labeling process will solve that issue. As Chris mentioned a bit previously about what's happening next, so we are hoping to expand the whole role process. So our first stab at the role process was the last version. What we're hoping to do is incorporate the set of restrictions on an opportunity into the whole sort of role mechanism. So instead of selecting restrictions and roles separately, which may or may not be connected, things like requiring a DBS, requiring an induction, requiring references, they'll be incorporated into the role that you create for that opportunity, and that role will be assigned just to that opportunity or for multiple opportunities. So you have a sort of template and ability to say that all these opportunities must have these things each time they're created. So you'll create it in the same way as you do the role. So you'll be able to add as many different tasks and options that need to be fulfilled before you can join that role, and it will all be self-contained in that role. So we'll lose some of that complications around restrictions and what it means and the interplay between restrictions and applying and roles, and hopefully group that all together in one place. To add functionality, we're going to work on some Zapier integration for people that already have CRMs or other pieces of software which have an API and can interact with Zapier, like Salesforce, for instance, or Slack for messaging, any of those things that are supported by Zapier. So you don't need to know anything about the code. You don't need to know anything about connecting applications together. You just need to know your secret ID in order to feed that into Zapier. And then there's a bunch of tasks that you can put together. So on the one side, on our side, it may be when a new opportunity is created, when a new volunteer registers, when hours are logged. There'll be numerous sort of tasks. And then you tie it together with tasks that are available on the other application. So for Slack, it may be create a message in this channel when this happens. And all the information that gets sent and goes across to Slack, and you'll see it in your Slack notifications without having to do any sort of coding. Similarly, we're looking to integrate to offer some more functionality with some other companies. Tempo and VHelp, we're going to have some information from them tomorrow. VHelp is for paying expenses without having to know the volunteer's bank accounts. So the way that works is you set up an account with VHelp with your bank details in. Then when the volunteer is requesting a payment for an expense, they open the VHelp application, and then they enter their own bank details and stuff in there. And the admins don't need to know it. They can just say, make a payment to this person, and VHelp handles all the exchange from bank account to bank account using the open banking system. So it's a nice, secure, private way of paying volunteers. If you personally in your organization don't have access to the bank, you don't need to log in every time you need to pay an expense and log into your bank account. You can just do it all just a click of a button. Tempo is an interesting proposition. It's about exchanging hours for actual physical rewards and goods and benefits. And they're going to have a chat to you tomorrow about how that can work and how you might be able to, in the future, might be able to mark opportunities as Tempo compatible. So any hours they earn on those opportunities can be sent to their Tempo account, and they can redeem them as they wish. We briefly mentioned about customizable permissions and authorizations for admins and providers. So this is going to be our new way of controlling what users can do. So we'll target the most requested things to start with, and that will be part of the admin or the provider's profile. So instead of just having a super admin and a regular admin, we'll still have that division, but the regular admin will have a subset of options that you'll be able to switch on and off for that particular admin, like the ability to create opportunities, for instance, might be one. We're also going to focus moving forward on less new features and changes. There's always good ideas coming out, especially from you guys, and there's always new things you want to put in, but we're going to try and restrain ourselves a little and try and make sure that what we've got fits together properly and it's refined and it works as well as it can. which isn't as exciting to talk about, but will hopefully lead to a better product and a more stable product, and also will prevent that issue where there's so many features that people don't know how to use it and end up getting switched off because it all looks too complicated, and they don't understand the interplay between these features because there's too many of them anymore. So for the next year or two, hopefully we will be adding less new stuff and just making what is there work better.
And Rolf, you mentioned about the ID verification in DBS earlier, or I mentioned it earlier.
Yes, so that's another one of the integrations we're looking at. So although we're looking to add less features, to keep the product up to date and to keep the functionality matching what people want in the future, we're looking to integrate with existing things as within the product. So instead of building new things, leveraging what's already out there and best in class products in other areas. So one of those is a DBS check-in, and we are working with a company called First Advantage. Is that their new name or the old name?
That's their new name, yeah.
That's their new name. First Advantage, and they offer a start to finish process for doing criminal checks. The way it works is you can request a criminal check. The volunteer downloads a piece of software onto their phone. That handles all the ID verifications and checks using photographs, passport, RFID information from the passport, driving license checks, and it goes through that whole check first to authenticate their ID, and then we'll go on then to perform whatever checks you require, be that valid driving license, right to work, and also criminal checks. In England, it's available for both types of
DBS all the way up to enhanced.
Yeah. Yep. And Scotland, it's only available for the minimum one.
Disclosure Scotland, but not PVG at the moment. Yeah,
at the moment. And they look at a sort of a 24-hour turnaround. So from the point of requesting the criminal check, you could have the answer in the app without doing anything within 24 hours. So there's no paperwork there. There's also an option for people without phones to do it by the post office. So that's a bit more complicated and probably won't come in the first iteration, where they could take all their ID documents to the post office and it gets checked there. There is a cost per check, but it's competitive with what you might pay now, but with the added convenience. And those costs will be dependent on the number of checks you make.
Vote. Can you hear him, Chris? I can't hear him.
No, just lost you, Rolf. Sorry, Rolf, you've just got your volumes. Sound's just gone off. So I'm ringing you again.
Was it the magic of Bluetooth earphones? Always that wired.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, but it still takes over the headphones. I'm going to switch it on. What did you get to?
No, nothing. We've just we got to that it's chargeable and it'll be roughly in line with what you're paying currently.
Okay.
I think that was the main takeaway. So tomorrow you will get the chance to hear from the guys from Tempo, from vHelp, from First Advantage, who will tell you a little bit more about their particular services. As we do think, taking it up to 2030, these kind of additional services are going to be fundamental to what volunteer is going to look like over the next 7 or 8 years. These integrations and having a volunteer experience where they can go to one place, but all these things are included and built in. That's how we see the next sort of 6 or 7 years going for volunteering, and finding yourself in a position where a volunteer has more ownership of their volunteering and more ownership of their profile and more choice, but also building more reward, more recognition, because we know that volunteers are they have a rare resource, and we've got to make sure that we make life as easy for them as possible, and that they're rewarded and recognised for what they do, and they get a sense of gratification from the volunteering they undertake. And everything we're doing here is to sort of make that journey as straightforward as possible. Tony mentioned about Do It, Rolf, and I know we said about that. There's a few things going on with Do It at the moment that we're trying to get to the bottom of. We did in the past have an API link to Do It, but as of this moment in time, it's shut down, and there is well, there's some moves afoot that we believe do it may not be doing it much longer from in terms of supporting opportunity data coming into their system. So, but there is other conversations going on with people in the sector about, how potentially we share opportunity data outside of TeamKinetic to other platforms like we have done in Scotland. And it's an ongoing ambition of ours that that volunteer data is not volunteer data, but opportunity data is more interoperable with different services and systems. And it's something that we continue to work with sort of other providers in the sector to see if we can come up with some kind of solution to help with that. Any other questions? We've got 2 minutes before sort of we're due for the break. So, oh no, we're 10 minutes. We're 8 minutes late. So if we can say we can reconvene at 11:35, that gives everyone a chance to go and have a quick brew. And if we'll come back then and get more into the detail with Steve on reporting. Is that okay with everybody? And we'll see you back at 11:35. Cheers, guys. If anyone's got any questions, the chat will stay open and we'll try our best to answer them. And we'll see you back at 11:35. Take care.
Yes.